Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Welcome back, everybody, for some more SPTV, where every day is a good day not to be in a cult. I am joined once again by my friend Tommy Scoville. How's it going, Tommy?
I'm having a great day.
Hey, before we get started, real quick, let me just show everybody your YouTube channel, the Lifeboat. This is a channel dedicated to recovery. Tommy, is it exclusively substance recovery, or does this have anything to do with reassimilating in society after prison, or is it just
honestly? When we first started out, we were just trying to deal with people who had drug and alcohol problems, and the more that we started to build the channel, the more we realized that addictions are addictions, you know, and very often we have people who come on who have never had substance abuse problems, but like the environment, so to speak. Very positive place to be, you know, no judgment, and just a great group of people. So no, there's a lot of people there that have never had a drug problem.
That's great. So here's what we're talking about today. We're talking about Danny Masterson. We're talking about the Nation of Islam. We're talking about Tony Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan. And the inspiration for this conversation was you and I did an interview just a number of days ago, which once this is all uploaded to YouTube, I'll put a link to it up here or up here. And you were talking about what Danny's life in prison is going to be like. And you were talking about it from your own personal experience. You spent 13 years in the prison system, a lot of that time in California. And you mentioned that no group, no gang, no religion will even accept Danny Masterson to join them. And you said, except for the Muslims, and you explained why. Okay. Now, in response to your explanation, some people in the comments section asked about, well, wait a second. Doesn't the Nation of Islam have this partnership with Scientology? And couldn't they protect him in prison? Now, most people probably have no idea that Louis Farrakhan and his organization, the Nation of Islam, has a partnership, a brotherhood with the Church of Scientology, that Louis Farrakhan, starting in about 2003, 2004, started encouraging all of the members of the Nation of Islam to go do Dianetics auditing. He said that, and it was Louis Farrakhan's friend, Reverend Alfredi Johnson. Reverend Alfredi Johnson, he calls himself a Baptist minister, but he's really been a Scientologist for like the last 30 years. And Reverend Alfredi Johnson is sort of, I mean, I hesitate to use this language, but it's the way it is in Scientology. He's like Scientology's token black minister. He's the one they use to pretend that you can be a Christian and a Scientologist at the same time.
Right.
Okay. Reverend Alfredi Johnson had a friendship with Tony Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan, and he somehow introduced them to Dianetics. And Louis Farrakhan got hooked on Dianetics. And he said to all the young black men in his organization, you need to use Dianetics. He goes, Dianetics is the science of the mind. Scientology is more this religious belief system. But let's use Dianetics to heal our young black men of the trauma they've experienced as youths in the household. Let's try to reverse this generational trauma that exists. And anyway, so when people started asking me about this partnership between the NOI and that the NOI has a pretty big presence in the prison system, I said, look, they might call themselves the Nation of Islam, but Muslims don't consider members of the NOI to be Muslims. And this person said, in prison they do. And I was like, oh, shit. If that's true, I got to talk to Tommy about it. So what do you have to say about whether the statement that you made in our last video, that only the Muslims would actually accept Danny and no one else would, does that apply to the NOI? What are your thoughts on everything I've said so far?
Okay. So when I was inside, there were three different branches of Islam, right? Very distinct groups that would claim Islam. The Nation of Islam is one, right? One is called the Moorish Science Temple. And then the third would just be, they just call themselves Muslims, and they are devout. They pray 5 times a day. They do all of the, the prepared rituals, they eat together. They are very much devout and really dedicated to their religion. On the flip side of that, they're not huge into recruiting. But if you walk up to those guys and say, hey, you know what? I'm wanting to join you guys. I made a lot of mistakes. I've seen a lot of white guys who turned Muslim as soon as they got to prison, and they basically get protection because of it. They're now a Muslim brother as long as they live that way. Nation of Islam does not like white people, right? It is a completely different, same with the Moorish Science Temple. Both of those religions believe that, we're the white devil. And I mean, it's not even veiled. They're very outwardly, they like to speak about it. They think that we should have complete segregation. It is a very, very different thing. Now, I would be really blown away if either of those religions would take him. But the Nation of Islam is probably, they recruit harder than any religion I've ever seen inside. Like they put on the full court press. If a young black guy comes in, they are instantly on him, a couple of cups of coffee, and they would like to talk to him about the Nation of Islam. But you're right. The way that they live compared to the Muslim guys, I mean, it's night and day, and their belief system is completely different as well.
Does the NOI have a substantial presence in the prison system?
In the federal system, it was hit or miss depending on the yard, and it tended to be the higher the custody level, the more of them that you saw. When I was at the FCIs, which is Federal Correctional Institution, I didn't run into a lot of them, but in the USPs, the United States Penitentiary, I did. I think some of that has to do with the fact that part of their doctrine is they want them to basically attack with paperwork. And there are very few religions anywhere in the prison system that file more grievances about the food, about, what they can wear, because they all want to wear the religious, what they call that thing, a kifi, something. It's got a deal that they wear on the top of their head. They're always filing paperwork, always. Well, you continue to do that, and they're just going to up your points. I mean, they tend to get pretty angry. So a lot of them were at the higher custody level. And when I was at the special management unit, they had a huge presence. I mean, huge. There were so many Nation of Islam guys that were in the special management unit where you're locked down 23 hours a day. There was a lot of them.
Do the devout fundamentalist Muslims in prison consider members of the Nation of Islam to be Muslim?
They'll give them the the salam alaikum as they're all walking by each other. And I bet if it were to turn into us versus them kind of a thing, that they probably would all sort of fall into line, but they would eat separately. Like they had their own, two very distinct cars. It definitely was two different, but there's a level of respect. And I think a lot of that has to do just with the color. Black guys tend to respect one another. White guys tend to respect one another. It really is like 1950 or 1940 in there. They encourage segregation and racism.
So when you talk about fundamentalist devout Muslims in prison, you are still mostly talking about black people, not Middle Eastern or brown people?
The Middle Eastern and brown people that end up in the federal system are usually in there for some pretty heavy stuff. You know what I mean? Words that we won't use on here because you'll get your video instantly dinged. But people that really have extremist views, and for that reason, they do everything they can to keep those people separate from other people they can indoctrinate. So they have a place called the CMU, which was like the SMU that I went to. SMU is if you're violent or you get in too many fights, get caught with drugs too much. The CMU is you're trying to recruit people into your brand of extremism, or you're doing something over the telephone, or you mailed a letter to a judge that threatened them. It's a communication management unit, and they make the ability to send letters out or talk on the telephone a very difficult thing to do. And they really sort of ride roughshod on those guys, but that's where a lot of them end up. So for the most part, you don't see a lot of Middle Eastern guys in normal population.
That's amazing, because when I think of a Black American Muslim, I tend to think Nation of Islam. I don't tend to think traditional fundamentalist Muslim. Which would you say had a larger representation in the system? Traditional Muslims or Nation of Islam folks?
Again, kind of a hit or miss thing, depending on where you're at. At the higher custody levels, you're going to run into a lot of Nation of Islam guys, a lot. At the, just because they tend to, again, they file a lot of paperwork and they tend to be people that have a lot of time. I met a lot of lifers that were Nation of Islam guys, or the Moorish Temple people, and apparently Nation of Islam spun off of the Moorish religion. That's where that originally started, and I've heard that from Louis Farrakhan's mouth himself. So there is some truth to that. They used to argue about it, but there's a clip on the internet of him saying yes, yes. So they're similar in beliefs, those two, but they're night and day from what the traditional Muslims believe.
So, when you say the Nation of Islam folks will not accept a white person, that's interesting, except for this strange partnership between the Nation of Islam and Scientology. I mean, Scientology, other than the Mormons, is probably one of the whitest organizations that exists. I mean, it is, at least by statistics, 98% white. And the remaining 2% doesn't mean the remaining 2% is black. It's just everything else is the remaining 2%. Yeah, just non-white. And you have this crazy thing where, Tony Muhammad is the leader of the Nation of Islam for the West Coast. He recently finished OT3. So he's jumped from Dianetics to full-blown Scientology. He knows about the Xenu stuff, the 76 trillion years, I don't know what the Nation of Islam's belief in the afterlife is, but I don't believe it's consistent with Scientology's belief in the afterlife. Like Tony Muhammad has gone full Scientology. And by the way, there's a direct connection here to Tony Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan, and Danny Masterson. So, Danny Masterson, when he drugged and attacked Jane Doe 1, she went to the Scientology authorities. Jane Doe 1 is the one who actually had a $400,000 civil settlement with Danny Masterson when they were both still Scientologists, brokered by Scientology. Reverend Alfredi Johnson, who again is the one that brought Tony Muhammad into Scientology, Reverend Alfredi Johnson was personally involved in trying to broker what I'm going to call a peace summit between Danny Masterson and Jane Doe 1, where Alfredi Johnson was trying to get Danny Masterson to accept and acknowledge and admit the magnitude of what he had done, and to stop making jokes about it and stop shirking responsibility and just admit it and say you're sorry. Right. So Reverend Alfredi Johnson knows what Danny Masterson did and was even involved in trying to smooth it all over. So Carol Masterson could go to either Alfredi Johnson or directly to Tony Muhammad and say, I need you to protect Danny on the inside. How in the hell would the Nation of Islam accept the one white guy who, by the way, is in for the kind of shit you don't want to be in for? Like, you've already explained in the first video that no one's going to want to accept a guy with a dirty jacket is how you, or a bad, what did you call it? What?
Yeah, dirty jacket will do it. Yeah, bad paperwork. Here's the thing, though. We think in terms, and I'm out now, but when you're in there, you think in terms of shot callers, big homies, like all of these different expressions that basically mean if this individual tells you to do something and you don't, you're probably going to be in trouble. But if that kind of order came down from somebody on the outside, you know what I mean? Like if Louis Farrakhan said, hey, you need to take this guy in, I would be really surprised if the people on the inside, wouldn't do that. I think it's the concept that these individuals are doing Scientology. I mean, when you told me that, I found that out right before we went live, people, and that one just sort of floored me. I didn't see that coming at all. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. I will say this, the Moorish temple, they believe in reincarnation. And very often you'll hear them say things like that Jesus and Muhammad, and they'll name off so many different, sort of big religious figures, and they'll claim it was all the same person. He just kept coming back and being reincarnated into it. So, and then the Nation of Islam, their belief, one day they're reading out of the Quran, the next day they're reading out of the Bible. But I wouldn't say that it's a normal, the doctrine is really odd. The very start of the church, what they said is, when you're dead, you're dead. That's like actually a quote from the literature. So, but they had if you Google them and you look them up, you're going to see UFO come up really quickly in the description of the religion. So apparently, maybe that's the tie-in. you know?
Yeah, I know that both organizations get described as UFO cults, and it's funny, when I was in Scientology, I thought that was just such a strange way to describe Scientology. Now that I'm out, I sort of understand what the phrase means, and I understand why that description would be used. And I wish I understood a bit more about what the NOI folks actually believed. But like, so let's say Louis Farrakhan or Tony Muhammad sends down the order. Okay, you guys got to protect Danny Masterson. Does that mean he has to actually walk the walk in order for them to justify protecting him? Does he have to pray with them? Does he have to study with them, eat with them? Do they let them? Would he let him live with them?
That's an excellent question, and that is like the question, because if you let's say you get to prison and you just don't want to have your paperwork's good, but you don't want to put work in, you don't want to do anything like that. You just want to stay out of the mix. You're not going to fight. There's not going to be drugs. You can go to the shot caller first day, and everybody basically knows this. And you can say, I am a Christian. I want to ride with the Christian brothers. I'm not putting work in. I'm not doing anything. They'll say, you got it, right? There's your pass. But if they catch you drinking, or if they catch you doing drugs, or if they catch you cursing, or you're not hanging with, the Christian brothers, and you look like you're living a normal life, you're going to be in really serious trouble. So when you say things like, would the Nation of Islam protect them? I don't think the white boys would be particularly happy with them just sort of walking around him like bodyguards. I think he would probably have to walk the walk, which means living with somebody from that religion. That would be his cellmate. And seeing two different races in a cell is really an odd thing. I mean, really an odd thing. In 13 years, I didn't see it.
Wow.
Never saw it once.
Now on the outside, and this, I have a lot of ignorance on this subject, but on the outside, my impression of the NOI folks is that they're a bit straight edge. Is that wrong? Like, are they, is that a fair thing to say or no?
Yeah. They don't want them drinking. They don't want them doing drugs. They don't want tobacco. They encourage vegetarian eating a lot, and just basic values. And in all honesty, like the tenets of the religion seem to be, what you would want to do to raise kids that would respect society. It just, when you start getting to the hate factors, if you happen to be, Jewish or white, that religion doesn't look like it's so friendly anymore. They believe that we are engineered by someone named Jacob, and on the island of Patmos, who through a breeding program over the course of, about 600 years, they developed the white race. Only we came out really bad. We could never tell the truth. We could never. It's really, actually, if you read it, it's hard to read without a smile. I'm not mocking anyone's religion. It's just funny to hear the how we sound. We're just not good people.
Sounds reasonable. So I the impression I have of the NOI is they're known for taking care of their own. They're not afraid to defend themselves, but I don't think they're known for instigating violence, because they're trying to live the best version. They're trying to be the best version of themselves. That's my understanding. And I'm wondering, how does that translate into prison? Are they the NOI folks, are they known to instigate violence, or are they known to be a peaceful group?
In my experience, they all hang out together, and I mean really tight together. If they do any kind of business, you know what I mean? Like, people run stores inside so that, if you want something, but you don't want to wait 7 days to get it, you can go to the local store guy and say, I need a bag of coffee. And then when you do go to store, you owe him 2 bags, like that kind of thing. That business like that takes place all over the units. They won't do business with somebody that's not, of their group at all. There's just, but I've never seen them violent. I've never seen anything, even remotely like that. They're just really like a cell unto themselves. These guys don't spend a lot of time talking to even other blacks. They really seem to insulate themselves. The times you see them angry, they're usually angry at staff. I watched a guy almost destroy a cell because everybody got to go to Ramadan. They would go down. They don't eat until it's dark. So, they get kind of hungry, and then they all go down at once, and they have a feast every night. And this guy, his paperwork wasn't done or whatever, and he didn't get to go down there. And he went absolutely ballistic. Like, I've never seen anybody get that angry. He he literally destroyed the cell. He was, yanking bunk beds off the wall, and very unhappy guy.
Wow. So, Tommy, I'm told that if you go to the Washington, D.C. Church of Scientology or the Detroit Church of Scientology, the majority of the staff members in those orgs are NOI guys with their bow ties and their suits and everything.
Yeah, I just did not see that coming.
It might be Danny's saving grace.
And they all do wear the bow tie or the ties. The only people that don't is their military arm. Like, if you ever seen the guys that protect Farrakhan, or the guys that guard buildings or whatever, I mean, that's no joke stuff. Like, they look like they just repelled out of a Black Hawk helicopter. They walk around in combat fatigues and are carrying heavy artillery.
Wow. Guys, if you're one of the 1,500 people watching live, do us a favor and hit that like button. It actually does help, believe it or not. Okay, so some questions, some super chats here. Let's take a look at these. X222. If Danny was in New York or Illinois or Michigan, maybe the nation would help out for Ron's sake. But he's in California. Devil Scientologists are still devils. But the California leader is Tony Muhammad, and he's gone full Scientologist. OT3. Most Scientologists aren't even OT3.
So how long ago did this union start?
About 2003, 2004 is the first time I remember it. And I'll tell you why I remember it, because it's the first time I heard Jewish Scientologists complaining about Scientology giving Louis Farrakhan an award.
So he got an award then?
Yeah. And Tony Muhammad was issued just a few years ago. He was given at a major international Scientology event, the IAS Freedom Medal, the same type of medal that Tom Cruise was awarded. Tony Muhammad is one. The IAS Freedom Medal is the highest honor a Scientologist can be given. And Tony Muhammad was given this award by David Miscavige personally. I mean, it doesn't get bigger. You don't become more of a Scientologist than that.
I could see as a necessity, a church saying, you know what, we're opening this up to a lot more people. This is going to be good for business. I just don't understand what the Nation of Islam gets out of it, unless they're getting a big kickback. I don't understand. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me at all.
I know, and I remember thinking that that's probably what it was the kickback thing, because Tony Muhammad is going to get 10 or 15% commissions on all NOI money given to Scientology. But you're like, yeah, but that's only 10 or 15%. If Tony Muhammad just kept it all in the house, he'd get 100%. So even that doesn't totally make sense. Okay, next one. M. Kaz. Tommy, so glad you're not in prison anymore. Are there any noble crimes that the other prisoners would respect so much that if you did them, you would be almost untouchable while serving?
Oh, yeah. Almost all of them. I mean, bank robbery is a good one. The people who, if they're lying about what their crimes are, at least in the federal system I'm talking about, that gets an awful lot of respect. Usually, as long as you did not hurt a woman or child, that's, at least in the federal system, that's really kind of where they drew the law. Oh, and elderly. Like, if you ran a scam and they find out that the money that you were ripping off are elderly people, you're in deep trouble. That's one that nobody seems to like too much. But in all honesty, if your paperwork is good, you can just put your head down and walk around, and you're not going to get extorted. You're not going to get messed with. It's not hard to stay in your lane. The trouble is, if you got 10 years, at some point along the way, you're going to go, maybe I just buy one bag of wine, right? And then the next thing you know, you're sort of starting to get more accustomed to this. And then you're hanging out with a different crowd, and some drugs come in, and, it's people try to go in with the best of intentions. I did it 3 times, and I only did it once where I did it correctly, right? My first 2 times in there, I was just an idiot. And, you sort of have to make yourself focused, or you're going to end up in trouble. It's just the way it goes.
By the way, I don't think I ever asked you, how many banks did you rob?
Officially?
That they know about. That they know about.
I think 7 was the number that I originally pled to. And then what they do is they'll let you plead it down, and you cut a deal so that they can't charge you going back a certain number of years, which is kind of important, and then you do what's called you have to write down everything that you can remember, what banks you did, what time you did them, how much you got, that kind of thing.
Very interesting. Okay, this Moorish thing, by the way, until you mentioned this word to me earlier today, I had never heard this word before. I've never heard of the Moorish Science Temple ever. And you're saying these people consider themselves to be Muslims?
That's how they identify. They're not. I mean, it's more of an Islamic religion than anything else. They say that they come from Morocco, and what's crazy is all of them will have one of two last names, right? B-E-Y, Bey, or the other one is E-L. And so once somebody joins the religion, they're gonna end up with one of those two names. So there was quite a few of them at the last prison I was at, and it was odd because there'd be 7 guys all eating, and every one of them's last name was Bey, or that's how they refer to one another anyway.
Okay, so this says Moorish Science Temple is a scam like NOI and Scientology. Noble Drew Ali, founder, inspired Wallace Ford, founder of the Nation. Oh, Nation of Islam is like out-tech Islam. Okay. Chow Yun Smut. Tommy, I worked in addiction recovery for 5 years, 3 years inpatient, 2 years outpatient. It was the hardest, most rewarding work I've ever done. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, AA Run, for these lives. Well,
thank you. It's a nice thing to say. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Stefman. Video on the inner workings of the e-meter might be fun. If you'd like, I'm familiar and would be happy to walk you through it on or off camera. Well, thank you. I have done a video or two about the e-meter, but maybe there's some more that we can do. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in. I mean, the idea that Danny Masterson's best bet for protection, I guess you said the Muslims, the fundamentalist or traditional Muslims, that they would actually accept Danny if he genuinely wanted to join. And I wonder which one Danny would be more likely to do: become an actual Muslim, or just be this weird white boy who for some reason is being protected by the Nation of Islam. Because I feel like that's going to somehow come back on him in one way, shape, or form.
I can't believe that that's been going on since, 20 years. And I've never heard anything about it. That's crazy.
Oh, and I should say, for any of you members out there who might be members of the Nation of Islam or former members of the Nation of Islam who want to talk with me on my channel about this very strange partnership between the NOI and Scientology, you can reach me at growingupinscientology@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you about it.
A fascinating marriage, so to speak.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thanks to everyone who watches until the very end. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, that blows.
If you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.